Good evening. Today I'm going to talk about climate change and its relationship with Southern Appalachia. To do that, I'm presenting a slideshow created from gathered information from reliable news publications, including references to environmental professionals, as well as local inhabitants of Southern Appalachia regarding their concerns of climate change crisis and how it does and will continue to affect their way of life. We will also be discussing the importance of the Appalachian Mountains in the coming decades. Here we have some questions that we will be exploring and we will attempt to answer throughout this slideshow. In the Southern Appalachian region, we have tall mountains and deep valleys. And although we are largely protected from many natural disasters, flooding is not one of them. Through the years, as temperatures steadily rise all across the world, that has meant deadly flooding in Southwest Virginia, Tennessee, Kentucky, West Virginia, and Ohio. Floods are one of the impacts that climate change has had on both our environment and our socio-economic system. But don't think that we are just victims of climate change. However, Appalachia is home to industries such as coal and lead mining. Although these industries provide jobs and stability for many, it's not without its consequences. As for local contributions, we have both positive and negative. Appalachia could potentially be a safe haven during climate change. The Appalachians also hold plenty of conservation potential for new species as their natural habitats are impacted. Some negative contributions that Appalachia has had on climate change include the overmining to meet industrial quota, habitat and forest fragmentation, potential population increases. That is one that climate change has on Appalachia. Flooding, droughts, and other major weather events are largely associated with climate change and rising temperatures, and Appalachia has seen them. As for local climate change, although the Appalachians seem to be a safe space for wildlife biodiversity, climate change is still impacting Southern Appalachia. The cities here are some of the most drought vulnerable in the country, while the Ohio River Valley is vulnerable to increased flooding. Similar to the one in West Virginia in 2016. During that flood, 23 lives were lost and over 1,200 homes. This flood bore the national's highest death toll from a flash flood since the 2010 flood in Tennessee, Kentucky, and Mississippi, which killed 27 people. The disasters sometimes lead to looting, which obviously has a negative impact on economy in the area as well as public safety. This information gathered by NASA's Goddard Institute for Space Studies put together a graph of the temperature anomalies from 1880 to 2020, and as you'll notice, the anomaly in Celsius, the baseline was 1951 to 1980. This is the common baseline, and as you can see, we have really, really gone above it. So much so that the last 10 warmest years in the 141-year record have occurred since 2005, with the 7 most recent years being the warmest. If we continue this, we can expect detrimental effects. Certain impacts on the environment include potential introduction for invasive species, with relocating and opening up the Appalachians to new species that are not native. We do run a risk of introducing an invasive species or even decreasing populations of our native species. So another thing is deforestation and forest fragmentation, extreme weather events. These are all potential impacts from climate change on the environment. Another one, these are more pros. Potential safe space for biodiversity, for plants and animals, introduction of new species in the area. Although there are cons to it, there are also pros, such as opportunities for evolutionary advances in wildlife to our native species and the species that are being relocated here. However, new studies have shown that the mountains of Appalachia are being scarred terribly by strip surface mining, and they now have to cover 3 times the amount of land for 1 ton of coal. Although this mining is helping the economy by providing jobs to hundreds, it is severely hurting the environment, and with the scarring of these mountains and the fragmentation of the habitats from this strip surface mining, this will definitely, if continued, decrease our ability or our chances of a safe haven status for wildlife. Since the Industrial Revolution began, the environmental health has been on the decline. There was one publication that states that Southern Appalachia can be a safe haven due to its natural resilience and booming biodiversity. First, that biodiversity is threatened by mining. In addition to forest fragmentation, by roads and dams, urban development threatens both our economic and our ecological health. This reason is one of many concerns that residents here find upsetting. With the population growth in response to COVID and climate change concern for Appalachia, our economy and way of life seems to be on the minds of many Appalachian natives in terms of how these will be affected by a larger population. One statement from a local on the economic structure in which we are in here in the States. This local states, "My dad always told me the mountains would protect us from climate disasters, but the yuppies are going to price us out in the next 10 years. Facing rising temperatures, the Appalachian Mountains are at higher risk of flooding, droughts, and forest fires, which increase the risks of losing more habitats and biodiversity. But unfortunately, it doesn't stop there. There are also impacts to our socioeconomic balance. climate change is unfortunately costing Americans money as well. Disaster impacts on taxes and incomes, coupled with the costs of rebuilding after extreme weather events, cost this country millions, even billions of dollars. The U.S. Global Change Research Program released an assessment in 2018 that reports that current emissions projected, based on current emissions projected, it will cost the country $500 billion by the end of the century. The last social impact is housing. Potential increase in population and its effects on the housing market. As more people come in, higher demand for homes and suitable living arrangements will drive the market up, leaving poorer Appalachians without homes. And I feel like that would also increase the homeless population in our area. With all of this considered, it's really hard to choose what would be the best routes of action for mitigation and adaptation. One thing that I do know is action plans, policies, local, federal, and international responses to climate change and its effects. This graph shows that it shows the states that have released a action plan for climate change. The darker blue is in the process of updating their plans. The green is rescinded, and the light blue, which I think is only one, is developing a plan in the process right now. But as you can see, many of the states are still gray. They don't have any action plans. That's why it's so important to vote and to take climate change more seriously when it comes to local and state elections. Mitigation and adaptation tactics may come in the form of policies, treaties, or laws, but it can also come in the form of conservation. This example in particular is conservation introduction, which is the introduction of species to an area for the sake of conservation. Although these practices do come with their own set of consequences or risks, relocation of wildlife, new species introduction, and rewilding are essential for adaptation of species and climate change, especially species that come from destroyed habitats. They are unable to survive and thrive in their native habitats. Since Appalachia is one of the most biodiverse places in North America, the possibilities for conservation are widely ranged. Bringing endangered or threatened species into the region could improve that species numbers and present new possibilities for evolutionary advances of our native species as well. So to summarize, climate change is happening in Appalachia. Climate change urges extreme weather events. Climate change affects all life. Human, plant, animal, all life. There are ways we can adapt and mitigate the effects of climate change. Conservation in the Appalachians could potentially save species from extinction. Local and federal and international policies are a solution. And remember to vote green. And if anyone has questions or want to further their research, based off of my findings. These are my citations and sources